Welcome to another episode of Trang Tries It, where I try a spiritual or metaphysical reading so that if you like it, you can book one too. So today you'll see that before I get a reading, I actually pulled up my chart, and they usually ask for your date of birth, the time you were born, and also the location you're born. And actually the reader can pull up your chart and then actually interpret it for you. And so what someone has told me before is that it's kind of like a mix of partially like a personality test mixed with some astrology with a little bit of spirituality. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's get started.
So I'll just start off just kind of going into being a generator. I know you have a good sense of it, but just to kind of talk about some of the nuances and what that really means for you and your business and personal life and all that stuff. So generators, as you probably know, you really came here to create, to lift other people up, to bring that energy of lightness and sparkliness and that buzzy kind of energy. But the caveat is you will only have that energy when you're doing things that you love doing and doing things that truly light you up. So if you're saying yes to things you should be saying no to, you're actually going to feel tired and drained and that energy of I don't really want to be here. And then other people are picking up on that energy. And so you don't have that buzzy, sparkly thing that we want you to have and that you should have. So that's the interesting thing about being a generator is getting really, really clear on what lights you up, what you're really passionate about, what is full body yeses to you, and then what is no, this is not aligned. I'm only doing this because someone asked me to, or because I feel this is the only way I'm going to find success because I took some course online, et cetera, et cetera. So really, what's interesting about our world or our society right now is that we constantly think that we have to go out and grab things and reach for it and chase things. But what's interesting about being a generator is you really don't have to work that hard. Things will be constantly put on your path, and all you really have to do is respond to it, because that's the strategy of a generator, is to respond, right? So it's really the universe putting things on your path, and all you have to do is say yes or no to the thing. Yes, I want to go do that, and no, I don't want to do that. So it's really as simple as that. And I think that we overcomplicate things, and our society is just if you just sit there, nothing's ever going to happen. You have to chase things, and dog paddle your way through life. But for you, it's really just do I want to do this or do I not want to do this? If that kind of makes sense.
So I just want to preface this by saying there are, I think, 5 types. When you pull up your chart, there's 5 different categories you could fall into. So mine is generator. There's manifesting generator, manifester, projector, and reflector. So for anyone that's listening in who is a generator, this will apply for you. And finding these, I kind of knew a little bit about human design beforehand. So I'm just giving this a little information in case you've never heard about it. And so when you find which 5 types you are, you can find out ways you can do decision making that actually comes naturally easy to you. So right now she's talking about what it is for a generator, but this doesn't apply if you're a reflector or a projector or a pure manifester. Yeah. I think how do you know if it's one of those things where in the moment you're excited for it and then later on you're oh no, I shouldn't have said yes to that, if that makes sense? Or even the opposite, where it's you're I've had a week of feeling funky, and so I just feel saying no to everything.
What's interesting about your chart is that, I don't know if you've seen this on your chart, but you're actually an emotional authority.
Yeah. Okay. I know. I've seen because I've gotten pulled the free chart online, but a lot of the stuff I'm I have no idea what this means.
Yeah. So what's interesting is yes, you're a generator and you're responding from that gut, that sacral center, but you're actually an emotional authority. So the buck stops at your emotions. So for you, you are someone who kind of has these emotional waves happening within you all of the time. You're not kind of that cool, calm, and collected person. You're kind of more highs and lows and ups and downs and all of that. So for you, before you go to make decisions, you have to wait until your emotional wave kind of passes. Because if you make a decision when you're in a high or in a low, it's going to not be the right decision for you, right? Because maybe you're really excited about everything. Your emotions are on a high right now. So you're just saying yes to everything. So you're yes, life is amazing. Everything's so beautiful. Yes, 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 yes. And then you wake up tomorrow, the wave is past and you're ooh, I actually don't want to do 8 out of those 9 things that I just agreed to yesterday. Or the opposite, where you're in an emotional low and you're saying no to everything. So you're just oh, I can't deal. I'm in a funk. I'm not in the mood or whatever. And then you wake up tomorrow, the wave is past. and you're like, oh, I actually kind of wish that I had said yes to some of those things because I actually do want to do them, but now it's maybe like I don't want to go back and say like, oh, never mind, I changed my mind and all of that.
Oh yeah, I think I was reading online that I think someone was suggesting, I think, oh, for that, I guess is a response or like a script to say is like, oh, can you give me 24 hours to think about it?
Yeah.
Is that like probably usually for those people what you recommend?
Like the best thing for you is to buy yourself time. And it's really hard in our society because we are expecting answers immediately. People are going to always be pressuring you to get back to them immediately on things. So the more you can stand your ground and just say, you know, I need to sleep on it, I can back you to you in 24 hours, whatever you can do to really buy yourself that time. And that goes for not only business relationships, but also personal relationships.
I was gonna say, I was like, if someone's asking on a date, you're like, can I think about that? Does that sound fun?
I mean, it's like, yeah, like if you need to 24 hours to like think about this date or whatever, for sure. But it's really just like in terms of like, you know, if you're in partnership or like friendship or whatever, and someone is, you know, putting pressure on you to make a decision on something of like, you know, buying this house or, you know, going to this like concert or whatever it is, ask them to give you the time and let them know that you're this emotional being and you have to wait for this wave to pass, and just be like, you know what, if you want to go to the concert, buy your tickets. And then if I feel like going, like, I'll get my ticket later or whatever it is. But it's just like that, avoid overcommitting to things too far in the future.
So actually, this really does resonate really well with me in terms of I overcommit and I don't cancel because I don't want to flake on people, because I don't like when people flake on me. So when I heard about this, I just learned, pretty much I'm learning to really, when she said buy myself time, and instead of maybe not like initiating being like, okay, let's do dinner on Thursday at 7, right? So that's really hard for me to be like, you know what, just kidding, never mind, can we cancel dinner plans? But instead of doing that, now I'm learning to just really maybe wait it out and then kind of initiate maybe doing plans or committing to something later.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, so because you're an emotional authority, when it comes, like once your emotional wave passes and you kind of feel back to that neutral state, you know, you're no longer in a high or a low, revert back to your emotions and see how that thing is making you feel. Is it making you feel like happy and like that sweet kind of like good emotion? Then it's probably aligned for you. If it feels neutral, you're probably just not ready to make a decision yet. And then if it's making you feel low or sad or blue or like grossed out, it's just not aligned for you. So that's how you can kind of like go through the decisions to figure out, like, is this a good decision for me? And then, you know, because you're that generated, that sacral being, when your gut and your emotions are saying the same thing, that's when you know it's the best decision for you.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And
also, so what you're probably maybe, or at least for me, what I'm getting from being a generator is really like listening to the gut more of the body feeling, yes, do this, right? But just keep in mind, if you are a manifestor, projector, or a reflector, this way might not apply to you. It's like a different way.
Then when because you're that emotional authority, every emotional authority there's different waves that you can have. The one that you have is more of a subtle emotional wave. So it's going to be not as intense. Some people have like spontaneous highs and lows or this like escalator emotional wave. Yours are a little bit more subtle. So it's not going to be as intense as some of the other emotional waves that you could have. So it might be kind of like harder to get to know it at first, just because it is a little bit more subtle. But once you can get to know your pattern, and like, you know, it'll be different for everyone. So maybe your wave lasts 24 hours, or maybe it lasts a week. But just get to know your wave, and then you can kind of get a sense of like how long it's going to take you until you can make that decision, right? Because if you know your waves usually last about a week, then you can say, you know what, I'm just going to get back to you next week about this. Or like in 24 hours about this, because I know my wave. And then the more you can let people around you know about your wave, the better and more like healthy your relationships will be and friendships will be. Okay. Because they're going to know like, oh, I have to give Trang like, you know, a little bit of time before like you can actually make a decision. Otherwise, I don't want to be like pushing and forcing, you know? Yeah. And then when it comes to your sacral center, so the sacral center is like a very visceral center. So your body is going to be kind of telling you when you're excited and lit up by something or when you're not. So if you're excited and lit up, you're going to be like sitting up straighter in your chair, like getting that like kind of sweet like smile on your face. And then when it's something that you don't want to be doing, it's a no, you're going to be like sinking, kind of shrinking, kind of like icky, grossed out kind of feeling, and like in your whole body. So you'll really be able to tell based off of your like physical manifestations whether it's aligned or not.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then also the other thing about the sacral center is it can't respond to open-ended questions. So if someone asks you, do you like, what do you feel like eating later? You'll have no idea. But if someone says, do you want to go get pizza or sushi? Immediately your gut will be able to answer that question, because you'll have that like response, because it needs to respond to something. It can't respond to this like open-ended, like ethereal kind of like question like that. Or like, is it the same, like, do you want to go like skiing, or do you want to go to the movies or whatever? It's like very easy for the gut to respond to that, rather than like, oh, what do you feel like doing? You're like, I have no idea. I don't know how to answer this question. And then that's when there's tension in relationships, because the other person's frustrated that you're not making a decision, or you're not voicing what you want to do. And they think they're forcing you into something, but you're just kind of like, I need you to give me binary questions, and it'll actually help me be able to respond a lot quicker.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Does that resonate a bit?
I usually am the one that initiates, like, let's say like eating out, I'm usually the one that, because most people are like, what do you want to eat? And everyone goes like, I don't know. So I usually have a list and be like, do you want this, or this? Let's narrow it down. And and then from there on, but usually I initiate.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. And it's helpful as well, like, because your gut is able to respond to those things. So if you are making those lists of like things that you can decide from, and then also just like seeing what's being put on your path, like that day, like in the morning, if you saw like an ad for, pizza on the subway or whatever it is, it's like these things are being put on your path, and it can work as small as like what I'm going to eat later, but then also as big as like, big life decisions, like getting married, buying houses, whatever it is, like those life altering decisions. And the more you can, start to practice this in smaller things that are not so life altering, the bigger your trust muscle will get for the bigger decisions, right? So then when it comes to like, buying a home or whatever it is, you're not going to be shaken as easily. You're not going to be rocked as easily, and you'll be like, oh, I trust, because I've spent all of this time building up this muscle.
Got it. Let's go.
Yeah. So that's kind of like, and the other thing that I would mention about being a generator is that often, generators as children, like you guys are often conditioned to think that your value lies in how much you can do for other people. And that is like such a dangerous thing, right? Because then you end up just saying yes to everything and trying to do everything for everyone, which is obviously not helpful to anyone, especially yourself, because that's when you end up feeling tired and drained and all of that stuff. So if that might've been the case for you, working on deconditioning that idea of like, oh, I'm only valuable in how much I can do for other people, or I have to say yes to everything, even though it's going to deplete me and drain me, and I'm actually not lit up by this thing, because I was conditioned to think that I have to do things I don't enjoy doing. And that is like the most scary thing for a generator, is to like have to do things that you don't want to do, because it's like that feeling of like, oh, I don't want to be here. So it's actually, you have to get a little bit more selfish in order to help other people, because the more you can actually be in service to your own desires, it'll actually allow you to be able to actually help people in the areas that you're most passionate about, and the areas that are lighting you up the most, right? And then it's going to be like gangbusters, and like, and how much you're going to like light up the people around you, and how far you can actually help them get ahead in their lives as well.
Fun fact. So if some of you guys have been following my newsletter, you will know that I grew up in a low income to poor family. And so, because my parents were immigrants and refugees from Vietnam. And so when she was saying this during the reading, what popped in my head was that, and what I saw emulated by my parents was that because you are poor or you don't have money, there's, when you're trying to help other people, or if a friend's in help and need, you can't really throw money at them or other kind of stuff. So they would always help in acts of services, or like ways you can or like either cook or provide, or like give other people car rides, things like that. So I just want to share that.
So I think that's like a good overview of just like being the generator, the authority, and all that. Do you have any questions about that part? No? Okay. And then in your chart you have, have you looked at your chart you have, right?
Yes, I don't remember most of it, but yeah.
You know how there's like those boxes and triangles and like the big ones? Those are your energy centers. So one of them we've already talked about, which is your sacral center. You also have, like, at the bottom of your chart, you have your root center. And that's the center for kind of like pressures and deadlines live in that center. It's like your relationship to getting things in motion. And then your energy centers, whether they're colored in or they're white, that means that you either have it defined or undefined. So if you have it colored in, that means you kind of have a buffer to the outside world. Like, you kind of have your own thing going on. And where there's whiteness in your chart, you're like picking up from other people. So you're like able to really pick up on the energies of other people in those areas. The root center at the bottom of your chart, you have yours defined, you have it colored in. And because it's related to pressures and deadlines, you kind of have your own pressures and deadlines within yourself. You're not picking up as much from other people in that center, so other people's pressures and deadlines. But ask yourself, why am I pressuring myself to do this thing? Is it because I'm actually really lit up by it and I'm excited and I want to do the thing? Or is it because I'm afraid of, missing out on something, or I'm afraid my parents aren't going to be proud of me, or I'm afraid of, not finding success in my career, or whatever it is? Because if that's the case, that's not really a good pressure or deadline for you. So just try and kind of stop yourself a little bit before you actually jump on a pressure or a deadline or things like that. This is okay. So you have your chart from here. So that's that center I was just talking about is the bottom one. Oh, it's
this one right here, or even down here.
So that very, very bottom one. It's the root center. It's like the base, basically. And since you have yours defined, you're someone who's really trusts in life and you're very grounded.
Okay.
In that center. And then the triangle on the right hand side there. So that's your solar plexus. So that's why you're an emotional authority. It's coming from that center, because that's where the emotions really live, is in that solar plexus. Okay. So we we already talked about that. You have your own set emotional wave, and it's energetically correct for you to take time before you actually make decisions. And then you have that subtle emotional wave. And then the sacral we discussed as well, and that's the center for creativity, desire, and then all of the energy centers are actually linked to physical parts of your body. So obviously the sacral is linked to your gut and sexual organs and things like that. So for you have yours defined. So your desire is really peaked when you're in that creative kind of zone, and you can actually create energy for yourself in that center. And you can really rely on more consistent energy in that center. And then on the left-hand side there, that's your spleen. Okay. So the spleen is really where fears and instincts live. Yours is white, so you don't have that center defined. So that means that you are easily picking up on other people's fears and instincts around you all the time. So if this might kind of start to make a little bit more sense now of in your experiences that you've had in your life, it's easy for you to really pick up on someone else's fear and instinct. And when you pick up on these things, you not only pick up on them, but you also amplify them. You make them bigger, you magnify them. So before you just quickly jump on someone else's fear, ask yourself, is this fear really necessary? Do we really need this fear? Is it helping keep us safe and alive and all of that? Or is it helping keep us stuck and stopping us from really moving forward? Because there's some fears that are actually good fears. They're keeping us safe and alive and everything. But then there's some fears that are really not useful. They're not helpful. They're really just fear mongering fears that we don't actually really need. So you can actually be the person who stops certain fears from growing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting once you start noticing it now, and start to notice the fears that you have kind of internalized and told yourself oh, I need to have this fear because I learned it as a child or whatever, and start to notice where did I pick this fear up from? Whose fear is this actually? Is it a fear from my mom or my teacher or whatever when I was growing up? Because maybe I can let this fear go. Maybe it's actually not helping me in life, and it's actually stopping me from reaching my highest potential.
So when you say I amplify it for when others around me pick up their fears and instincts, is that when you say amplify, do you mean more of I bring it to light, or more of I make it worse?
Yeah, not that necessarily that you make it worse, but you make it bigger than that person who had the original fear. So if your friend is afraid of heights or something like that, you would then, if you're around them, then you are gonna, and you're at the top of some building you're about to jump off, you would then pick up on that fear and make it even bigger. And now you have made that fear of heights intense and a little bit over the top and maybe unnecessary. And maybe if you had stopped yourself and said, I don't think I'm actually really afraid of heights in this way. I'm actually not too worried about this. Then you would be bringing that energy to your friend of kind of neutralizing that fear and not making it like grow and become greater to the point where you're both like, oh my God, I'm so terrified. Like we cannot jump off this building. This is wild. You know what I mean? Like that's a kind of a crazy example, but if you use that in other areas, it's like, you can kind of stop, like, for example, like the whole pandemic, COVID, that was a thing that really got like picked up and amplified. And some people like were like immobile, like crippled by this idea of this pandemic or whatever. But if, for example, you know, someone was afraid of it and then you stopped and said to yourself, okay, like, yes, this is maybe something we should be concerned about, but maybe I don't need to make it like a life changing, like stopping doing everything, you know, that kind of thing. You can kind of help to put these fears on a scale of like what is actually necessary in helping us and what is not.
Okay, that's a great example. That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's just kind of interesting when you know about this, and now you can actually just stop yourself just like right before you hop on the fear and give yourself that 30 seconds to be like, do we need this fear? Am I actually afraid of this? Is this necessary? Or is this something that's actually going to keep us stuck? And you can like empathize with other people's fears. You don't have to just completely ignore them if you don't agree with it. You can empathize and say like, oh, I understand why you're afraid of this, you know, jumping off this building or whatever, but you don't have to like take responsibility for the fear. You don't have to take it on as your own. Yeah. So I think it's a good kind of practice to start, now that you're kind of going to be more aware of it, to start like kind of taking throughout your day and just notice like all the fears that you're like noticing throughout the day. And it's not just from people that you're physically around. It's like the news, social media, all of these things that are coming at you throughout the day. You're picking up on all of those things. So if you watch some like news thing on some fear mongering, whatever, you're going to pick up on that. And if you're not aware of it, you're going to amplify that and start telling all your friends, like, you guys, you know what we should be afraid of, like without giving yourself the moment to think, am I afraid of this? Is this something that's actually going to like help us or hurt us, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's your spleen. And then that tiny little triangle on the right there is your ego center. So that's the center for willpower and motivation. So since you don't have yours defined, you are someone who's not going to be consistently motivated every day. There's going to be some days where you wake up and you're super motivated and you want to go do all the things. And then there's going to be some days where you wake up and you want to do nothing and you just want to lie on your couch and like stare at the ceiling and you're just not feeling motivated at all. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with you. That's the way that you are built and that's the way you operate. And it's like a good thing, because on those days where you're not feeling motivated, something's supposed to be happening within you on those days. You're supposed to be kind of like, you know, working something out, figuring out like a project, maybe getting like an aha down from like the universe, you know, kind of figuring out your next move. And if you decide to ignore that feeling of feeling unmotivated and go out into the world and start like thrashing around, pretending like you're motivated because you want to like keep up with the rest of society, nothing's really going to come from it that day, because you were supposed to be staying quiet and staying still. And you're probably going to be missing like a message or missing like a realization that would have actually helped you reach your goal or reach your dreams faster. But you're getting in the way of it because you're trying to like interrupt the process by ignoring the way you're actually feeling.
For people that have this, do you kind of notice like a time span for them? Like, because you know how for women, we go through certain weeks of the month, like with our like our cycle and stuff like that. So there's some, you know, so for this, where people that are undefined here, do you know if it's usually like a week long or more like, depending on the day, 24-hour cycle, you know, because it's kind of hard being able, like, I guess not tracking it, but you know, I know like days you don't get enough sleep, you're like, I'm so tired, but then for days, so I'm like, how do you kind of figure that out?
Yeah, so it's going to be different for everyone, because everyone's chart, you have all this other stuff going on, and you also have your emotions adding into that. So it's going to be different for everyone how long your like not being motivated feeling will last. Usually it's just kind of like day to day. It's not like a feeling of like 6 months of not feeling motivated. Usually that's kind of like coming from somewhere else, really. This is just kind of more of that day to day thing. And so the days where you wake up and you're super motivated, go and like get shit done, like, you know, go do all the stuff that you want to do because you have that motivation today. And then when you wake up tomorrow, if you're not feeling motivated, it won't be like, you won't feel as bad because you got so much done on that motivation kind of high yesterday. And so it's kind of like, I can't really say how long this feeling is going to last for you, but you'll have a pattern and you'll start to get to know your pattern if you start paying attention to it. So just start kind of noticing, and the days when you're not feeling motivated, don't resist it. Like, lean into it and you know, stay still, stay quiet, stay on your own, stay in your own aura. And you'll probably start to notice that it's going to actually like accelerate and expedite all of your projects and all of your, you know, dreams and passions and goals and all of that stuff, because you're like leaning into the process. And, you know, I like to often think of it like kind of like shooting a bow and arrow. Like you don't just randomly start shooting, right? You take time to line up your shot. So on the days you're not feeling motivated, you're lining up your shot, you're figuring out your next move. So there's stuff that's still happening. Just because it's not like you like running around town getting all these errands done, it doesn't mean that nothing's happening. There's things happening within, and it's really just a practice of getting still, getting quiet, and like keeping that channel kind of open for you to actually get the messages that you need. But you can obviously, you can imagine like if you're out running around, you're not getting any of these messages because you're like go busy doing all this stuff. So the days where you're supposed to be doing those things, go do those things. The days where you're not supposed to be, like lean into it, because I like guarantee you it will start to like really change the progression of all of like the things that you want to get done and the projects that you want to work on and all of that stuff. Because I also have this center undefined, and that was like a huge game changer for me, because our society is so much pressure on, you know, get up and crush it and, you know, go to the gym at 6 a.m. and do all of these things every day, all day. Otherwise you'll never see success. And when you're living in that mindset and in that kind of like ideology, it's like a very quick recipe for a burnout and a very quick recipe to feel inadequate. Because if you feel like, oh, like I can't keep up with all of this, there's something wrong with me, I must be bad, or, you know, all of that stuff. So start to, you know, move away from that, whatever society is telling you to do, and start to listen to within, because you have all the answers within, and stopping putting like the power in other people's hands of like how you should be living your life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's maybe I'll have to like start tracking, because there's so many like factors that go into it, like not getting enough sleep or interrupted sleep and things like that, where but it sounds like based on my type, and also that it's really being like selective, right? Or even when they say like, oh, I just got a second wind, it's like, okay, now go for it, go for it now while you have the second wind.
Yeah. But I would also like take a look at your life and take a look at your day-to-day and see where you're leaking energy. See what's actually draining you. Like, where are you committing to things that you're like, oh, I actually don't want to be doing this thing. Like, you know, going to lunch with that friend like every week that you actually don't really want to go for lunch with, or, you know, little things like that, that's actually draining your energy. Because if you remove those things, and even if you get a bad night's sleep, because you're that generator, if you're doing all these things that are lighting you up, you'll probably still have energy and not be super tired, right? Because you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to go work on this project, or I can't wait to go meet up with all these people and collaborate on whatever this is. So even if you're tired, you probably won't even notice it, but you will notice the tiredness if like your next day is filled with 8 things that you really don't want to do, and you're just dragging yourself to all of these 8 things, you know?
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. And it can, for generators, it can be kind of scary to start saying no to things, because you guys love doing all the things all the time. Like, it's just like, it like makes you like energized and like thrive and all that stuff. So it's, if you think of it like a spectrum of like doing no things and doing all of the things, you kind of will pass over this neutral state. Doing all the things that don't light you up and doing all the things that do light you up, you'll pass by this neutral state of like when you're maybe not doing as much, and it might be kind of scary for you as a generator to like not be doing things for a minute, but just trust that you're gonna like tip over to that doing all the things that light you up kind of side.
Cool. Yeah.
So that's your ego. And then that big diamond in the middle is your G center.
Okay.
So that's the center for sense of self, direction, love, all of that. So you have yours defined. So you're someone who has a very strong sense of self, and you're someone who can, you know, walk into any room and kind of be this like consistent version of yourself, and you should be. That's like why you're here. So make sure you're never like judging yourself of like, oh, why can't I just fit in? Why can't I go with the flow? Like, why can't I just be like this group of people? Because you're not supposed to be. Like, they needed you to bring your energy and your personality and yourself into that room, because that's what they were missing, right? So they don't need you to like adapt to what they're doing or who they are, or try and fit in with them, because you're the piece that's probably missing. Like, that's probably a group of like super intellectual people, and then you're like that creative person. And if you come into the room and try and like pretend to be intellectual with them and ignore like the fact that you're like this creative energy, then they're still missing that piece that is like the piece of the puzzle that's going to make it all work, right? So just continue to like allow yourself that freedom to be yourself in every room, and to like be that strong, consistent like version of yourself. Yeah, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense when you're like, you're a very consistent person and who you are and everything. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of like you have like a little bit of a buffer again, because you have that like defined and colored in and everything. It's like you're more consistent in that center, and you have a little bit of a buffer to like the outside world, and that center of the outside world trying to tell you who you should be and who you are and all of that stuff.
So it's like if it was undefined and white in the middle, that means if I had that means I'd be more easily influenced by outsiders.
Yeah, and it's not like necessarily that you're easily influenced. It's like you're more, if you have it white, you're more adaptable. So you can fit into like you can kind of wear different coats and like fit in and kind of walk in other people's shoes. And there's nothing bad in anyone's chart. Like there's not, I think like we all have that idea of like, oh, like you should never just kind of like try and fit in like that, or like be like a chameleon like that. But there's like, again, like reasons why people have certain things in their chart, right? So someone who has that undefined, their ability to be able to kind of like walk into a room with like anybody and just kind of like fit in with that crowd is so cool, because they can really walk in their shoes. They can empathize with them. They can really understand how they're feeling and thinking and all of that stuff. And so that's their role that they needed to play. But you have the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's your G center. And then your throat is above that. So that center is like obviously for communication, but also manifestation. So you're really, because you have yours defined, you're really here to kind of like express your truth and like your desires and your emotions and motives and all of that stuff. Because it's connected to your G center underneath. And then also the center above it is your ajna. Because it's connected to those two centers, when you're speaking, like, because we just talked about your G center, and that's the sense of self and all of that stuff. When you're speaking, it's really from the depths of who you are, which can leave you kind of very sensitive to criticism, because when you're speaking, it's like, this is who I am. This is like the depths of my soul. So it really kind of leaves you a little bit vulnerable sometimes, and really sensitive when someone's commenting on what you're saying, because you're like, that was like the essence of me, of what I just said, and you're criticizing it, or you're, whatever they're saying about it. So just remember, like, as always, to continue to like not be afraid to share your emotions, not to be afraid to like share your thoughts and feelings on things, because you don't know what those things could be doing for someone else. You don't know how they could be helping someone else. You don't know kind of like the ramifications of like everything. As long as you're talking and speaking from an authentic place of how you're thinking and feeling, like everything like that, it's like there's no limit of like how far that thing could go, and you just have no idea. So by you stopping yourself because you're like, oh, I'm afraid of them judging me or like criticizing me or whatever, it's like you're stopping these like great, beautiful ideas from going out into the world.
So I would say younger Trang would definitely have worried about what people think. But now that, I'm older, and I think maybe whoever's watching it, when you get older, there is a point where you don't care anymore, or, because I am more of the public eye with social media and stuff like that. When someone writes, not a hate comment, but annoying comment, I just don't care anymore. So it is really beautiful when that happens, because you start to finally have the confidence, or even don't hold back from sharing your thoughts or trying to play a people pleaser or being overly diplomatic. And so that's why I think it's really important to, at the end of the day, share our stories, because you never know when someone might be going through the same thing, and you never know, like what Caitlin said, it might help them.
And then so the center that's above it, the ajna center, that's also connected to your throat, that is the center for opinions, judgments, and points of view. So you have yours defined. So it means that you have a very specific way that you see things, and it's a very important part of your purpose, how you see things. You're here to formulate a point of view. And so a lot of like creative people have this center defined because they have a very specific vision, like a photographer would probably have this, like a really good photographer would probably have this center defined because they have a very specific point of view, right? They're like looking at something, they see the beauty in it that maybe the rest of us are missing. So stop trying to like explain why you are the way you are, and just because it's kind of like wasting like that genius mind that you have, and continue to just share those, especially because it's connected to your throat. Like you have that kind of vessel in order to like put it out there into the world of this very unique way of viewing things. because, you know, you're going to see things in a different way than I'm going to see things. And the way you see things is so important for you and part of your purpose and everything like that, that you do have a duty to like kind of put it out there.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And then your very top center is the crown, and that's the center for inspiration. Since you have yours undefined up there, you're really more externally inspired. So when you're looking to get like inspired or find inspiration, it's like you're not going to find it just kind of sitting on your couch staring at the wall. For you, it's really about like getting out there, talking to people, going to museums, watching movies, traveling, all of that stuff. That's where you're going to really find your inspiration. That seems to ring true. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with traveling, for sure.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So just continue to like indulge in all of that, and like, you know, making sure that you're getting out there and not, you know, staying too much in your own home, just trying to like find inspiration, just looking around you, because like it's very unlikely that you'll find like consistent inspiration in like that kind of state. Like make sure you're still forcing yourself to get out there and everything like that. Okay, so those are all your energy centers. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of how those are all kind of working. And then have you like read up on your profile at all?
The 4-6?
Yeah.
Okay. So I kind of, yes, I looked it up and kind of like Googled and stuff like that. And of course, the stuff's kind of vague, but what I got from it as a 4-6 profile in my chart is that, what does someone say? It's like Oprah Winfrey. So it's kind of like you go through crap, like the first 1/3 of your, like life where there's difficult lessons. And then the next 1/3 of your life is like kind of like sharing at the world or like integrating or something like that. And then the last third of your life is like the golden years where you're sharing all this wisdom with people, kind of like a spokesperson and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. So I haven't read that about Oprah Winfrey. That's funny. Yeah. So the 4-6, we really like, we call it the regal authority figure. And so your profile, like the first number is kind of how you see yourself, and then the second number is how other people see you. So the fourth line is all about kind of an opportunist. So you are someone who's like a natural networker. You have a gift for forming very close relationships with people. And for you, like the quality of your life is really determined by the quality of your relationships. Like that saying, like that is very true for you. And for you, pretty much most of the time, all of the opportunities that come to you will often come through the people that you know, and not necessarily through strangers. So it's even more important for you to put an emphasis on the people who feel aligned to you, and the people who feel, you know, like that these are my people, because the opportunities that come through those people will always put you more towards your path. And if you're, you know, putting emphasis on relationships that are with people who don't feel aligned and people who kind of feel like, oh, I don't really like these people, the opportunities that come through those people will always kind of pull you away from your path. So it's very important for you to kind of, and it's not to say that those are bad people or they're wrong or anything like that. It's just like, they're not your people. And so just kind of spend less time and energy on those people and spend more time and energy on the people who feel like, this is my crowd, these are my people, because they're always going to like help you rise up, you know, because they're just going to be continuing to give you opportunities that will like draw you closer and closer to like all of your dreams and all of that stuff. So that's the 4 side. And then the 6 side, that's the kind of like Oprah Winfrey thing you were just talking about, is the role model. And it's kind of like a wise sage. So it's interesting because your life will kind of go through these cycles when you have this line. The first 30 years of your life are kind of like your trial and error phase, and you're kind of figuring things out. You have your feelers out, you're seeing what you like, what you don't like, all of that. And then as you kind of neared the end of your 20s, you probably got this feeling of like wanting to kind of zone in and narrow in on a few things that felt like really more fascinating and interesting. And you're like, okay, this is kind of my thing. I want to go dive deeper into that. Because then once you kind of hit your Saturn return, like they say in astrology around 30, then you're going to be hitting this phase of kind of like zeroing in on things and kind of like going in deeper to the areas that you found super fascinating in those first 30 years. So from like 30 to like 50, you're kind of in that phase. And then 50 to like the end of your physical life on this planet, you hit this like mastery, this wise sage kind of energy where people are just coming, like seeking you for wisdom and all of that. So it's kind of interesting to see your life go through those cycles. And it's weird, like when you're in that feeler phase and like in that trial and error phase, because you're just like, what's going on in my life feels like a roller coaster. Like, when can I get off this ride? And now like you're probably getting, like, you're kind of at the beginning of this next kind of 20 years of fine tuning and getting in deeper, whatever. So I think more and more as you get older, you'll get more clarity on what it is like that you really want to like get mastery over. Yeah, so that's the 6. And then when you put those two things together, you get that regal authority figure. And so it really makes you kind of like the king or queen or however you identify of your circle. Like, you're the organizer, you're the one who's like getting everyone together. You're kind of like the glue that's holding the group together. Without you, it kind of doesn't function. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that you can like one of your karmas kind of like with having this profile that you need to kind of embrace and like work on and think about is releasing control a little bit. Because often 4/6s really think that they have to like keep control of everything, otherwise nothing's going to work out the way that you want it to work out. So you just have this need to like just control everything and not let anyone help you with anything, right? Because you're trying to ensure like the best outcome, and you think that the only way to do that is through me doing it myself. But once you can kind of loosen that tight grip of trying to control everything and start to let people do some things for you and do some things on behalf of you, you'll start to actually see the proof that when you let go a little bit, things will still happen. The universe will still kind of show up for you. And that's how you can really start to trust in life, is letting go a little bit and trusting that like, okay, I don't have to do every little last thing. I can let other people do some things for me, because if you never let go of that control, you'll never see all the things that they could do.
I know in other readings I've gotten where they've talked about letting go of pretty much being less of, I can't remember verbatim, but being less of a planner, like letting go a little bit more of being a planner. And I know some of you guys watching in are more maybe spontaneous, and then some of you guys might be more planners because it's kind of like the essence of who you are. Or if you're in the Myers-Briggs personality test, it's like there's a letter that's like shows that you're more of a planner naturally, and it's more of like loosening that up. And so I'm still working on that, because it's really hard it makes me good at what I do, but at the same time, it's also like trying to find that balance.
Start to loosen that grip a little bit of like thinking and believing that you have to like be in control of everything all the time. But the other thing about this profile is that you are also really here to teach us that we don't have to choose between the heart and the head. We really need to make them work together in order to make decisions, because our society really is all about making decisions from the mind, from like the sensible, rational mind. But you are really here because you have such a huge heart. You have like that ability to like really get in deep with people and form those close relationships and everything like that. So your job is really to like open up that huge heart and teach the rest of us that it's not when you choose between the heart and the head, but when you make them work together, that like things are going to actually manifest in like the most beautiful ways.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I think when there's other, when I listen to other people out there and they say like, oh, you got to go with the heart and make decisions with the heart, and then other people are like, oh, you got to be logical, and I'm like, I think there's somehow got to be a tactful balance between those for different situations, and I haven't figured out. It's all nuanced and different depending on the situation, right? Yeah. So when you said that definitely was spot on.
Yeah. It's interesting that you've already had that realization, because it's it's something that no one really touches on that much. Like that is possible to make a decision from both places and like take like the best parts of both of those things and kind of like create it, like innovate a new way of thinking and a new way of making decisions. So it's like a little bit of like a trailblazer in that area. So continuing to tell, like, let people around have you tried kind of putting both of those two things together, because maybe that's where your best decision lies, rather than like feeling like you have to choose between one or the other and you can't have it all.
Right.
Yeah. So that's your profile. So hopefully that kind of explains the whole Oprah Winfrey thing a little bit.
Yeah. So when you're saying with like that concept of working with both the mind and the heart, did you get that from my profile, or more so my profile number, or more so from my chart? Because I guess it's kind of like more of like, how did I, in terms of life purpose, like that was the key point of like bringing it to the world, that idea. And so I'm kind of thinking like what other key life purposes there are based on my chart, or like things that I'm kind of came down on this earth to do and share. Because
Yeah.
I know like with the authority, like the throat area and just like speaking ideas out and stuff like that. And I'm just curious what other ideas there are or life purpose attached to it.
For sure. So yeah, that profile one, that's a huge part of your purpose. The ajna, again, that the way you see things, that's another part of your purpose. The other thing I would look at is your incarnation cross. I don't know if you've seen that in your chart at all. I don't think this chart.
It's on the. It's actually to the right of the chart. I'm just
showing
my screen, and it's the right angle cross of laws.
Yeah, exactly. No, I just couldn't remember because I get the chart from my human design now, but I couldn't remember if that chart shows it. Anyways, but I'm glad it does.
There you go.
So, oh, there you go. Oh, great. Oh, perfect. Yeah, so yours is, so the incarnation cross is really like a thread that will be running throughout your life. And yours, right angle cross of laws. I find like the names of them, like, what does that mean? Like it just means like almost. And so I find them, I don't know, just like useless almost, the actual titles of them. But that incarnation cross is all about being like a stabilizing force. You are someone who is really this like stable, dependable force in society as we move forward into the future. You are someone people are going to turn to be, because as we move into the future, it is scary, it's unsettling. And we're moving into the future faster than we ever have before. So it is super destabilizing for people, and people have no idea what to do, what to expect, what we're going to need when we get there, all of that stuff. So they will always be turning to you for that feeling of stability, safety, feeling like, okay, everything's going to be okay. Maybe we don't know what's coming, but whatever it is going to be beautiful and lovely and better than we ever could have expected. And we'll figure it out when we get there. Don't worry. So it's like continuing to recognize that in yourself and honor it, because you just have this like really strong sense of values and this really strong sense of like morality and all of that. People just like cannot not see that in you. It's just like, it's kind of like emanating off of you all of the time. So there's not much you have to like do about it. It's just continue to, highlight that part of yourself and continuing to bring that essence into the areas that you are fascinated and passionate about, because those are the areas that you're going to like reap the most rewards in by bringing that stability to those areas. So whatever it is that you like just want to dive in deep and get in deeper and explore and all of that stuff, just go towards that and bring this essence and bring all of your gifts with you into those areas, because that's what you're meant to do, is to bring your gifts into every area of your life that you're lit up by. Does that kind of make sense for your incarnation cross?
Yeah, it does. It's like who I feel like I am without even trying. Because I always want myself to be the stabilizing force, or the stable one in like relationships, friendships, that kind of stuff. Kind of makes sense because I'm a Capricorn too. So kind of, yeah. And
it's like, I know that sometimes like being that stability or being that stable one can feel like, I don't know, this like heavy responsibility, or feel like boring, or feel like, I don't want to be that, like, but when you think about it that way, in that we are heading, especially like now faster than we ever have, into this like unknown at like warp speed, for you to have that gift, that like very unique gift of being able to kind of keep the calm and keep the like, what's the word I'm looking for? Keep the calm and keep the like peace almost, and the stillness almost in like that warp speed kind of thing, is such a like beautiful gift to have. So just continue to look at it through that lens rather than through the lens of being like, oh, stable, boring.
Here we go again.
Exactly.
When you were explaining the example, I was like, oh, so it's like having a zombie apocalypse, but when people are with me, they know things are going to be okay.
Yeah, totally. And I think you probably, if you look at your life, like in every moment, then there was maybe like an emergency, you're the one that people are turning to, that people are like, okay, Trang will be able to sort this out, figure this out, it's going to be okay.
Rather than say that. It's happened quite a bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, because like also, so like we can get into some of your gates and everything. Like one of the gates that you have like down in your root center is all about deflecting struggle. So is
that in this one right here?
Yeah, in the very bottom one there.
Okay.
It's the gate 38 if you want to know the number, but it's all about deflecting struggle. So you are someone who has a very strong buffer when like things go shit hits the fan, basically. You know, like you're someone who's able to be that steady, like calming force, and kind of a little bit of a warrior of the light, of being able to bring like it, you know what guys, like let's not worry, like let's not freak out about this, it's going to be okay, and you know what, things might actually be better after this thing if we can get through it, if we can make it through it, like who knows what's the light on the other side. Okay. You know, it's always darkest before the dawn, or those sayings. For you, it's like, oh, I actually like truly believe in these things, and it's not just saying this to you know make.
So what does it look like if like 38 right here wasn't defined? If I didn't have a 38.
Yeah, so then you just wouldn't have, like, that's not one of your special gifts and abilities, and like you might sometimes be able to tap into it, but you're not very consistent in it, and so it's not something that you can like necessarily lean on all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, so like all the gates that you have that are colored in, those are your very unique gifts and like special gifts. And then if you have two gates that meet, it forms a channel. So for example, like the 59-6 going between your sacral and your solar plexus, so that would form a channel. So it's basically like these two gates are meeting and it's forming this superpower almost. So that's your channel. So actually that's like, we could talk about your channels, because I think those are super important for you to know. So the 59-6 is all about, well, the 59 side is about bond making. So you're someone who has like a gift for forming like close bonds with people, of being able to like, not just only with yourself and another person, but being able to like bond people together. Like, you know, you can sense like who would make good friends, who would make good relationships, like a little bit of a matchmaker in that way.
That makes so much sense now. Yes.
So much fun. I just love, like, I don't have that in my chart, but I just love that people have that ability of just like being able to look at two people and be like, you guys would be great friends, or you guys would be in such a good relationship together. Yeah. And then the 6th gate is about an attunement to intimacy, or like an ability to kind of create intimacy. But it can also, like, your gates, obviously we want to use them all in a positive light, but if we so choose, we can use them in a negative sense, but we obviously don't want to do that. But using that gate in a negative sense would be like also a fear of intimacy, because you have such an attunement to intimacy. It can also, if you're not using it correctly, it can kind of show up as like, oh, get away, like I'm afraid of getting too intimate, getting too deep with you. So making sure that you use it in the positive sense, which is, things can only get better if I get more intimate, if I get deeper, if I help these people find their intimacy and relationships and connection and all that stuff. And you have to remember that we are living in a society right now that is more disconnected than ever, and is, you know, both like physically and emotionally, like we're very disconnected. So for you to be here in this moment is a very special and important thing, because you're able to bring us back together, and you're able to kind of find the common ground, and you're able to kind of, you know, bond people towards each other. So when you put the 59 and the 6 together, that channel is all about facilitating closeness with people. You're like a facilitator of the closeness.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's just, it's interesting when it's like it's so funny when I tell people about their gates and stuff, because most of the time, like, you already know about it. I just like needed to highlight it for you to remember and to notice it, because often we dismiss our gates, or we get dismiss like our skills and gifts because they come so easily to us. We just assume they come easily to other people too. But it's like, no, not everyone has this gift, not everyone has this skill. So recognizing it in yourself and using it to your advantage. And you know, you can use it for business, but you can also use it in personal life. And it's you don't have to just like compartmentalize your life like that. It's like you're meant to use this in every area, like in the back of the Uber and in your office.
That's who I am for everything.
Exactly. So just making sure you show up in every area of your life with that in mind, of like, oh, I can, like, you know, really create closeness amongst these people.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm so glad. And it's such a beautiful channel to have. And then you also have, I'm just looking here, is the 10-20. So that one's going from your G center to your throat. So from like that yellow one up into your throat. And so the 10 line is all about like a love of life. So, which I love this gate. It's such a fun gate to have. It's like someone who's really meant to help other people fall in love with life by being so happy in their own life. So you're just kind of like emanating this like love and like beautiful like energy of life around you. So you're someone who can kind of like look at a dark situation and be like, but look what's gonna, like, you're going through a divorce, but you're like, but look, you're gonna meet all of these like beautiful, amazing people afterwards. Like, it's not so bad, it's not so scary. So by you just continuing to fall in love with your own life, you can actually help other people fall in love with theirs. Which is such a cool gift to have. And then the 20 is all about kind of like a truth teller. So you have the ability to kind of like call it like it is, but in a fun, exciting, thrilling kind of way. So not like a very like, it's almost like in a blunt way, but it's fun and exciting. Like you have the ability to kind of spawn change from that by, you know, telling it like it is sometimes, because sometimes people need to hear things. And so you're kind of like this truth teller, but in like this bubbly, sparkly kind of way. So it's not such a scary thing. Like there's some people who can be a truth teller in more like harsh, intense ways, but you're like a truth teller in a, this is so much fun, I'm just gonna tell it like it is, but it's actually gonna help you.
Kind of like, girl, you need to leave him, but don't worry, you're gonna have so much better people in your life in the next round, or something like that.
Totally, exactly like that. Yeah.
So if it was like the blunt truth teller, the one that's like a bit more serious and stuff, what would that like look like in terms of like the gates or the channels?
That one would be a little bit more like the provoking one, the provoking gate. There's like a gate that's all about provoking with consciousness. So that's when people need to be poked a little bit because they're a little bit stuck. They need to like hear it like it is a little bit. And that one's a little bit more of like a blunt truth, and not in a like mean way or anything like that, but it's a little bit more like, okay, this like shit is real and you need to notice that you're like stuck in this area, and I'm just gonna have to tell you so that you can move along. Whereas yours is more like, you know, the fun, leave him, but like, look what's gonna happen kind of way. Yeah. So, and both are good. It's just like whatever's showing up in your chart. So, so when you put those two gates together, it gives you the channel of kind of like a voice for self-love in the world. Like you're really here to like put your love of life into like a voice, basically, because like, I mean, that's connecting your G center in your throat, right? So it's like simply by being yourself, you're gonna kind of like inspire and influence other people to be themselves.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, you're like, once you can really master this on your own, it's like you're speaking up for your own self-love. You can actually help other people find their self-love.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, which is so cool. Like, I mean, shouldn't we all just have this channel so that we can all be inspiring that? But you know, you're meant to have it. So again with like the gifts and stuff, there's not as like much you have to really do or decondition or anything with them as much.
Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of like you know, that thing where you say, oh, what's Caitlin like? You're, oh, she's like naturally just a bubbly person that like really does cool, fun, like, I don't know, get-togethers and dinner parties, kind of like that. And it's effortless. You know, she's just the go-to person for that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas with your energy centers that we were talking about, some of those, like there might be some deconditioning that you got to do a little bit, like, you know, with the fear thing or the ego center and all of that. So there's like maybe a little bit more like to investigate in those areas, rather than the gates are just like a reminder of like, this is your special skill. So go do it everywhere you go. So that's that channel. And then you have the 1-8 going again between your G center and throat there in the middle, that tiny little guy. Yep. So the 1 is like, it's like the first gate. So that is all about the ability to kind of like create newness and freshness. And like, you have this kind of need to keep things new and fresh all the time. Like you kind of like crave it. And you can kind of spot potential for newness too. You're someone who's like looking, you know, you go to the grocery store and you're like, okay, like this would be so much better if it came like in a pack of 6 rather than like just singly like this, or, you know, just little things like that. You can really see like where newness would really work and where we can improve and where we can like bring the newness. But just be careful of like, you know, things can't always be new every second of every day. Like it's gonna be kind of in waves. So for you, like there might be some like a downfall of like the wave where you're like, oh, things aren't new at this very moment in time. Like I want everything to be new every single moment of the day. Just remind yourself that like, okay, it's gonna come in waves where there's gonna be newness, and like I can't be new every single moment. It has to like, there has to be a downfall of that wave. So that's the 1. And then the 8 is kind of all about like you're a tastemaker and like kind of like a little bit of like a marketer in that way. So you're really able to kind of see what's cool and bring it to other people. You just have that ability of like, you know, human design or whatever. You're just like, you're kind of always at the forefront of things, and able to really share it in like a fun, exciting, intriguing kind of way with other people, of just kind of like moving through life of like, this is super cool, I want to share. Like the fact that you were like, oh, I want to like share this reading with like my friends and stuff. It's like, you just want other people to like experience all of this just like you are. So yeah. So when you put those two things together, it creates this channel of like, kind of like a voice for self-expression. So it's like you can inspire people into new directions, and give them the freedom to kind of like express themselves creatively. And then not only that, you can actually also promote your own things. Like you're able to kind of like self-express yourself basically. So you're able to really, whatever projects you're working on, or your small business or whatever, you can really like promote your own things. And that just reminded me at the beginning when you were talking about not knowing how to like operate on like social media, or not knowing how to like put your business out there and all of that stuff. I would really look at where you're like, how you're deciding what you're like, the way you're managing your social media or you're managing your business, and where are you doing it because this is the way that's lighting you up and this is the way that you want to do it, and where are you doing it this way because you know read some article that this is the way you're supposed to do it, or you watch someone else find success in that way, so you're going to do it exactly like them, or you know, all of these things. Because you should always be like, you know, posting stuff that is actually exciting to you and thrilling to you and like that you want to share with people, and not posting things because, oh, I have to post every day at 9 a.m. otherwise I'm going to be irrelevant, or, you know, not posting things because you saw someone get like 1 million likes on something, so you're going to post the exact same thing to see if you can get 1 million likes, because you're never going to get the 1 million likes on the same thing because that was for them and not for you, you know? So just taking a look at how you're operating your business in a way that's like not authentic to who you are, and starting to move towards like, what is my dream way I want to operate my business? What does like my dream day look like? And start to move towards that. So where are the areas where you're not doing it in the way you wish you were doing? Like, how do you secretly want to run your business? Is it that you want to work like 1 day a week and like that's it? Or is it, you know, that I want to have like 20 employees, or, you know, whatever it is? Start to move towards that, because it'll actually find you more success than you trying to emulate someone else's business over here, or trying to like follow a formula that you found online or whatever.
Cool.
Does that, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's so helpful.
Good. And then the last channel that you have is at I think it's the 5611. Yeah, from the throat to the ajna. So the 11 is all about receiving ideas. So you're kind of like an ideas person. Like you just constantly have all of these ideas that are coming into your mind, and like kind of coming into your head. And it's like, it can be kind of overwhelming a bit, because you're like, oh my God, there's so many ideas. I want to do all of these things. And like, I can't possibly find enough time to do all these ideas. So just like write down every idea you ever have, and then like look at your lists sometimes and decide what ideas are for you, what ideas are for you to give away to other people who are more suited to like actually make that idea happen. And then maybe what ideas aren't necessary right now. Maybe they're more for the future or whatever. And then it'll be less overwhelming of you thinking like, oh my God, I have to like act on all of these ideas. Because, you know, some of the ideas they're probably great ideas, but maybe you're not the best person to implement them. You know, like maybe you have an idea for an app, but you have no idea how to create an app. And if you just gave that idea to like an app person, then, you know, they're going to create this app and like, it's going to be even more amazing than you even had in your head. So start to kind of like sift through your ideas that way, and just make sure you write them all down so that you don't lose any of them. So that's the 11. And then the 56 is kind of like all about sharing your take on the facts of life. So it doesn't necessarily have to be true or proven or anything like that. It's just like the way you see life and like your kind of like take on things, because there's like a wisdom in your view. There's like little nuggets there that if people are actually listening closely, they will actually be able to glean so much information from that and actually be able to maybe change their lives and like move forward and grow and evolve and all of that stuff. Because you kind of have like a different truth of life that's like a little bit esoteric in that way. So just like kind of leaning into that and owning it, and like not necessarily needing to explain everything all of the time, and just stating it kind of like a fact of like, this is just like my take on life, take it or leave it, you know? And then, yeah, so then when you put those two gates together, it creates a channel that is all about turning turning ideas into like fables or into like lessons, basically. So, and it's kind of like, if you think about it, it's like one of those children that is just like talking nonsense all the time. But if you really listen in there, there's like wisdom in amongst all that nonsense. And like often like adults will like shut them down and be like, shh, that's enough, like stop talking. But if you actually let them talk and you listen closely, there's something there. And it's like the most wise thing you've ever heard in your life, but it's in amongst all this babbling. But yeah, so it's really about you taking, taking those ideas and really just turning them into those lessons that we can kind of learn from. And so, you know, like fables from like storybooks and stuff like that, which is really just like a cool kind of fun gift to have.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are your channels. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else that's like jumping out at me on your charts. Oh, you know, one gate that I would actually just bring up to you that's in your spleen, where there's like that's like the fears and instincts kind of the triangle there. That gate, you probably have mind it, and that gate, if you're not getting away, you kind of like to curling a little bit in your life.
The 48 or the
50.
Okay.
Yeah. So that gate's all about an awareness of responsibility. So if you're not using this correctly, if you're using it in a negative sense, it looks like a fear of responsibility and a fear of becoming kind of like your highest, most powerful self. And maybe if you are having that fear, it's like you are afraid of if I become my highest, most powerful self, other people are going to have to lose out, or I'm going to have to step on all of these people in order to like get there. So it's a little bit about reforming from this idea of lack and reforming from this idea of, you know, if I become this high, powerful version, then I'm going to be above other people and I'm going to look like I think I'm better than other people. But if you can remember that the higher you get, you can actually bring people up to your level. So the more powerful you are, you can actually make other people more powerful. So if you start to like reframe it and look at it in that sense of like, okay, I have to step into my power. I have to step into like my responsibility, my leadership role. And the more I can do that, the more I can bring other people up with me. And it's not about me being above other people. It's actually about me leading the way to bring them up there too.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And when you were reading the chart and everything, it's funny because, you know, I feel like if I got this reading, let's say my early 20s versus my 30s, totally different. Because, you know, whereas, you know, when you grow and, you know, there's a lot of more lessons learned and wisdom along the way, the more you start to come into your power and have less of, not say the negative stuff, but you just learn and start to not care as much for certain things, or you're fed up with certain things. So then you're like, oh, okay, I worked through that already. Or you're like, okay, that was, I totally saw that version of me in my 20s, you know? So. Totally.
Yeah. And it's like, as we get older, like we become a lot more self-aware, and often because people are telling us certain things about ourselves.
This is like a good gift to get someone probably in their 20s, or just so they can see, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think well, I mean, it's helpful for like any phase of life. I think especially like parents sharing this like stuff with their kids, or like getting to understand their kids more, because, you know, a lot of us,
that's a great point. Yeah.
Because a lot of us, we were not, you know, our like energy, like we weren't raised in the way that maybe we should have been in order to like become like the best versions of ourselves, or to let those things shine. So then we end up hiding those parts of ourselves that we were told are bad or wrong, because our parents were maybe trying to like fit us into like a box, or keep us small and keep us like contained or whatever. And not from like a bad place or anything. It's just that they didn't know what to do with us. So I think
this is kind of like a good cheat sheet for a parent that has a kid or a baby, and being like, okay, I see that these are going to be their natural talents, and these are things I have to nurture and foster, because they have a tendency to be more XYZ maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like a parent who has like a manifesting generator child who is like interested in everything and wants to do all the things all of the time, if that parent doesn't like honor that and is trying to get like the child, and is not letting the child, you know, let things go when they're bored with things, and like forcing them to complete everything and do everything from like A to Z or whatever, they will naturally start to like kind of squash that part of themselves, because they'll think it's bad or wrong. So yeah, exactly. Like the more parents maybe kind of lean into this and just trying to get to know their children more, they can like let those parts shine and encourage those parts of them. And then also in like relationships, I just think it's so important to try to understand the other person, rather than like, all we ever want to do is make the other person exactly like we are, and like make them do things the way we're doing things, because we're like, what's wrong? Why are you doing it that way? That's so crazy. It's taking you so much longer, whatever. And that's when our relationships start to suffer, because we're trying to get the other person to like react or act in a way that we would, rather than celebrating the way that they're doing something. So
yeah, it kind of makes me think about when you read my chart, like someone might be like, why is this person so quirky? You know, and then when you read the chart, you're like, oh, that makes more sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, or why is Trang doing this way? And then you look at the chart and you're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Or why does it take you so long to make a decision? And it's just like, okay, well, because I have to like wait for these emotional waves to pass. And like, once I
think there is a fine balance of like how to do all this, but also deal with the life that we live. You know, like for example, this where it's like unmotivated part. It's like if you're working in an office job, you can't just like, you know, your boss is asking stuff for you. It's like you kind of learning how to work with that too.
And it's like, I always say, like, you know, it doesn't mean you have to change your life tomorrow. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow, whatever. But it's like, how can you make your current situation work better for you, rather than like, you know, trying to fit into this like already like working machine? How can you make this machine kind of like work in your favor? So if you do work in an office and you have that unmotivated days or whatever, again, you know, on the days you're feeling motivated, get all of your projects done, work on everything. So then if tomorrow you're not feeling motivated and you don't do as much today, it's fine, because you did so much yesterday. And it's like, you know, making the job adapt to you rather than you having to adapt to the job. Yeah. So like all of those numbers, those are like your gates on the sides or whatever.
Oh, that makes sense. So it's really here into this. Okay.
Yeah. But as you'll notice, you have like a person, like the personality side and the design side. Yep. So the ones that are in like, so I guess on this chart, the black, so that's your personality side. So the gates that are in black, that's your personality side. So those are kind of gates that you've played with before. You're kind of more familiar, more aware of them. Like when I'm bringing them up to you, you're probably like, oh yeah, totally. Like I totally.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then the ones that are in red, that's your design side. So it's kind of like things for this time around. It might be a little bit new. It might be harder to kind of tap into them, depending on conditioning or whatever it is. And it's kind of like, those are kind of like your karma for this time around to like really lean into. And then some of them you probably have, on this chart, it's not like, okay. So this chart, the ones where you have like red and then there's like black lines. So it's kind of like you have both colors going on at the same time. So it's like almost like you had it last lifetime and then we gave it to you again this lifetime, so that you really don't miss it this time, you know. But your personality gate, that's probably like your most important gate, I would say, because it's really like your kind of like the essence of like who you are. And yours is the 60. So that one is all about like an intolerance for roadblocks. So you have this like, I want to get going and I'm not going to let anything stand in my way kind of like energy about you. You know, it's just kind of like, this is who I am. And it's funny
because for me, I always saw that as just me being impatient, because I do have a tendency to be impatient. But I know it can be a negative trait, but that can also in my life a couple times it has served me well as well, because I don't get stuck on things. I don't get stuck into, I think, perfectionism. I'm just like, we just gotta go, you know, like just go.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's just like there's a lot of people who would just, you know, see a roadblock and be like, oh, I guess I can't go any further, and just like give up. But you're kind of someone who's like, okay, I see this roadblock, I'm just knocking it out of the way and I'm going to keep going, because I'm not going to let anything stop me from like getting where I want to go, which is an incredible gift to have, right? Because if we all just stop at every roadblock, then like we'll never get any further. But for you to just like knock them out of your way, and you can also help other people kind of see like, oh yeah, this might be standing in your way, but if this is something that you're truly passionate about, it's like a full body yes, then we're just gonna have to find a way around it. Like that's just what we're gonna do, you know? And so you can kind of help motivate other people to not let certain things stand in their way, because they're afraid, or they think they just have like believed so long in their head that if this is in my way, then I can't go any further, or whatever it is. But yeah, that is like a super important gate for you. So I would just, and it's funny that it's like, you know, in your personality black side, or the black color or whatever, because you, as soon as I said it, you were like, oh yeah, that sounds about right.
So if it was a design where it's like for here the 50, so what would that mean on the karma side?
Yeah, so that's interesting, because that's the 51 I talked about, which was that fear of responsibility or the awareness of responsibility.
Oh, that's this right here. This guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense. So I'm just like trying to like pinpoint everything in the chart and be like, okay.
Yeah. And so it's interesting that that's your top one on that design side, because it's really something you have to kind of work on this lifetime, is letting go of the idea of, you know, not wanting to be in charge in that responsibility role and like that leadership thing, and, you know, helping other people rise up and stuff.
This is where I feel like I'm glad with the age, because I think I'm at that point where I can take it in the positive light, especially because women, you know, you have your own business, and it's just like, once we uplift women, then the community just gets better. And so I think I've stepped into that instead of like I don't want to seem like I'm better than you and I'm the boss, you know. It's just more like, we need to get things done, we need to push humanity forward. So I'm glad I got that karma. Like, yeah,
for sure. And it's like, you know, that idea of like, you know, I'm doing human design readings and someone else is doing human design readings. You have to come from that mentality of, the more we can both share this love of human design, the more everyone will get better and everyone will reach their highest potential, rather than looking at it like, this is my competition. This is like, you know, that kind of energy. It's like, that's not helpful. It's really just keeping us stuck. So we might as well lift everyone else up and bring everyone else up with us, you know?
Yeah. I always say there's not like really a lot of like, I feel like competition in the spiritual world, because there's not enough of us, to be honest.
Yeah, totally. And also because the people who are open and like have those channels open to receive like the messages or whatever, the messages are always going to be different, and they're always going to be useful and helpful if they're delivered in a good higher consciousness way. So the messages will never be the same twice, you know what I mean? So it's like the more and more of us, because you hear something from one person, but then someone says it in a different way and you're like, okay, wait, now that's resonating. Now that's making sense to me. So,
it's kind of like, sometimes you might need to hear it again like a year later, because you've gone through life and you go like, oh yeah, that hits differently now.
Totally, because you just weren't ready to hear it like 10 years ago or whatever.
Exactly.
So I think that's interesting that you have that gate at the top on your design side. Actually, in your spleen, like the gate 48 that you have, which we haven't touched on, is all about an awareness of inadequacy. And so this is just popping out at me because, again, if you use this in a negative sense, obviously it's going to look like I don't have what it takes. I'm like missing something. I'm not good enough, all of that stuff. And maybe I shouldn't do it because I'm not qualified enough. But if you spin this and like use it in the positive light and you take it out into the world rather than keeping it inwards and you put it out there, it looks like I am someone who is aware, who can see when everything that we need in order for this thing to happen is not there yet. I can see the inadequacies of the world. And so that is a really powerful use of that gate. And so like fears, if you keep them inside, that's when they become negative. Because when you internalize them and you get into that self-speak of like, I'm not good enough, I'm not, adequate enough, or like that responsibility one, like I shouldn't be responsible, like who am I to be like taking the leadership role, But when you actually put them out into the world, they become positive. So just remember, anytime you're feeling that negative fear, self, whatever, put it out into the world and it'll spin it into a positive.
I love that. I love that, where it's just like, because that's another way of showing people how to think about it.
Totally.
Because obviously I know a lot of people have imposter syndrome, right? But if you're able to kind of spin it and shine the light more so and take it in another perspective, which is like, okay, well, we all know, like, we all feel that way, but it's like, what can the world do better? Or our ways at what's missing in the world.
Yeah, like what's missing. And it's not like a negative thing to think about what's missing. It's actually just like looking at a situation and being like, okay, I love this idea. I love where we're headed here, but you're missing like, the financing, you're missing, the creative mind, you're missing whatever in order for it to actually like reach its fullest potential. So I'm just here to let you know what you're missing and like do with that information what you will.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's
so cool.
Just a super cool way of looking at it. And like, just like the other gate that you have is in that center is the 44. That one's all about an awareness of the past repeating itself. So if you keep it inside, like that negative inside, like internalizing, it looks like I'm always going to be here. Nothing's ever going to change. The past is just going to keep repeating itself. And then you get into that dark place, take it out into the world. You can see like where we've already been before and where we're headed. And you have like a nose for the past repeating itself. So you can spot trends. You can hop on to new things. You can see like, oh, we've never done this before, because I have an awareness of where we've been and what we've already done. And I can actually see where we're going and what we're going to need when we get there.
Right. Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really
I really
cool.
do like human design, the fact that, because I've read about online and just saying, just like YouTube and stuff, and just, it's not one of those things where like, oh, this is a really rough chart. It's really more of like, everyone, you have these powers and you have these little things that you could spin into a better light if you work on it. And it's really empowering. So I really like it. And you were amazing reader. Like I was very comfortable with you, and it was very easy to understand with your examples and stuff, which I think is the important part.
Obviously we are all here for a reason. We're a piece of this like giant puzzle, and yes, there's like maybe things like ways you're using some of your gifts that are maybe keeping you stuck, but if you can just like, reframe them and look at them in a different way, everyone's chart is great and it's exactly the way it's supposed to be, and everyone is here for a reason, and there's no rough charts. There's just, and I think like I even like with astrology and stuff like that, there's, all of that like, negative stuff about certain signs and like all of that stuff. And it's just like, how is that helping anyone? It's not helpful to like look at it from that lens. So yeah, I love just how human design is just like celebrating the uniqueness of each being.
So there you have it. That is my reading, and I hope you enjoyed it. I thought Caitlin was such a wonderful reader, very easy to talk to. I felt like a conversation with a friend. And also what I liked about her, or even the human design, is that explaining that there are these weaknesses that are more tied with maybe karma, but in a way you can work with it to bring it to the world as a power. And also a lot of these things I didn't realize I guess that came easily to me. Were actually more of like superpowers or talents and abilities. And it's kind of like in your spiritual DNA that you're brought to on this earth to do. So that was pretty cool. I think this one is definitely a reading where they can give you information, kind of like a personality test, and you can apply it in different ways, whether it's to your career, business, or relationships, how to handle everyday maybe decision making. This one is not a reading I would go for, as you can see, for like predictions, right? So that would be maybe for other type of readings you would go for, but this is more of getting to know yourself and how to apply it to make it work with you and who you are. And what you're meant to be. So, and definitely in a way I think this is actually a great gift for maybe a parent, or even if you're a parent, to understand more of your child and what their tendencies are and how to work with it and see why, who knows, maybe why your kid's been acting has a certain temperament for certain things or certain situations, and realizing that this is kind of their spiritual genetic DNA. So I hope you enjoyed my reading. I hope you understand more of what human design is for. I think it's a really great modality, and just to get yourself better. And I hope more people get discover more about it, because I found it really helpful. So let me know in the comments what you guys thought of it, and if you're thinking of booking a reading. And if you found this video to be very helpful, don't forget to click the like and subscribe button down below, and share this video with a friend that might find it useful. And I'll see you in the next episode.